Even the most basic organisms avoid pain and discomfort in their quest for survival. Illness and injury don't feel good, and that's in part because they're meant to warn our bodies about detrimental or even life-threatening conditions. Aside from being in physical danger, a sick or hurting body can stop us from participating fully in social or cultural activities. So, it might seem safe to assume that preserving a healthy and intact body is a universal human goal. But the human body is an instrument of complex impression and expression, a vehicle for individual experience, a medium for social meaning, and an artifact of political control. We make meaning out of its appearance and sensations, which can override its biological instincts. So, some people do hurt themselves on purpose for personal, social, cultural, and political reasons. Many culturally sanctioned rituals involve actions that violate, deprive, test, or risk the body's health and integrity, or practices that mark or modify the body. These are often felt to be in the service of community stability, spiritual devotion, and collective well-being. For example, tooth filing is a coming-of-age ritual in Bali. Here, the shaving down of sharp canine points symbolically removes the animalistic aspects of human nature, such as lust and greed, that threaten group harmony. Other painful coming-of-age rituals, such as scarification amongst the Chambri tribe in Papua New Guinea, test the courage and endurance needed to face the trials of adult life, imprint tribal identity, and provide cohort bonding. Self-injury also plays a part in spiritual initiation and religious practice. In numerous cultures, initiation into shamanism requires a level of injury. The shaman must understand and endure pain in order to heal others. Some religions also include self-mortification as part of their spiritual practice as physical proof of identification with or presence of divinity. Other, sometimes less radical body modifications can signal gender identity and social roles. All these physical practices, while painful, can provide peak experiences that bond people with the community or the divine, or symbolically signal their adherence to the social order and highlight their place in that order. Individuals who directly modify their bodies or cause themselves pain outside of such contexts can also be engaging in a dialogue with their societies, whether critiquing cultural norms and expectations or finding ways to cope with cultural demands or failures. Body modifications popular in certain countercultural movements can be read as protests against the values of mainstream society or personal reclamations of physical agency. Other more radical bodily practice, such as hunger strikes or self-immolation, can be used to draw attention to a political cause or plight. Self-harm is a less publicly visible physical practice that is both painful and meaningful. Often called cutting, self-harm can also include such practices as burning or picking at wounds in the skin or more severe self-mutilation, in the deliberate and direct, non-suicidal destruction of one's own bodily tissue. While typically associated with a history of trauma or abuse and or a diagnosis of mental illness, like other culturally sanctioned forms of bodily mutilation, self-harm does provide effects experienced as beneficial.
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
Adolescence, the angsty, awkward transition from childhood to adulthood. The time spent experimenting, getting away from your parents, and figuring out who you are. Toss in some sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But that's changing. For earlier generations, the biggest health challenges for teens were binge drinking, teen pregnancy, and driving under the influence. They're all declining. At the same time, teen depression, anxiety, and suicide rates are all rising. Mental health issues were already on the rise prior to the pandemic, and early indications suggest that isolation has only worsened the problem. In 2021, leading pediatrics organizations jointly declared a national emergency. Adolescents, many with underdeveloped coping skills, face an information onslaught, flooding their still maturing brains. So many ruminate, trying to quiet the emotional noise, looking for ways to take control. In just 1 decade, ER visits for young people who tried cutting and other forms of self-harm rose by 329%.
I self-harmed because of overwhelming emotions.
I've self-harmed because my head is so full of anxiety and stress that I needed some kind of release.
I've always done it because I didn't like myself.
It was just a way for me to deal with the pain.
I think it gave me an element of control that I didn't feel that I had in my life at that time.
I also self-harmed because I wasn't feeling any emotions.
Because it was an escape, it was just a get-out clause, it was a way to leave all of the madness that was in my head behind.
I suppose it was a point of, well, you can't see what's going on in my head, but you can see the scars on my arms, so now can you ask for some, like, whether I'm okay?
In a more gradual but no less dramatic process, people can undertake practices that more indirectly harm their bodies, often in the service of what is felt to be a higher goal. Fasting is a common and normative practice in many parts of the world. People temporarily endure the discomforts of hunger or thirst for spiritual reasons, seeking to strengthen the self-control, sacrifice, focus, and purity needed to emulate and access the divine. But some forms of fasting amplify these culturally normative practices, turning them into potentially or purposefully fatal self-starvation. Some Japanese Buddhists revere the Sokushinbutsu, which translates as instantly advanced to Buddhahood, but has also been glossed as living Buddhas. These are the human remains of monks who slowly mummified themselves by increasingly restricting their caloric and then fluid intake, remaining in a state of constant meditation until they passed away. To believers, these monks are not considered dead, but immortal. Their spirits have not left their bodies, but have become even more powerful within their corpses, capable of telepathic communication, magical healing, and crisis intervention in times of disaster.
This is the Buddhist mummy of Tetsumonkai. He has been here for over 170 years, since he finished the process of mummifying himself. We believe that, despite his physical condition, his soul is still present here, and that it is a powerful force for the local people. When the former chief priest of this temple brought me here for the first time, I had a strange feeling. Sitting on front of Tetsumonkai, it didn't feel like I was watching a dead man. Instead, I felt that he was watching me.
Self-starvation is also seen as a path to elevated status in a very different cultural context. For a young woman with anorexia, an ever thinner body becomes a physical manifestation of her self-control and power in conforming to the ideals of Western feminine beauty. But what begins as an extreme form of a normative cultural practice, reshaping the body through diet and exercise, can lead to a fatal lack of calories and nutrition. Anorexia was once primarily thought of as a disorder afflicting upper-middle-class white adolescent girls, but it has become globalized, along with media images of ultra-thin women as the ideal and discourses on how to achieve this ideal. These globalized norms put new communities of women at risk, and there has been a recent rise in body dysphoria, anorexia, and eating disorders in many cultures. In Fiji, for example, a large, robust body historically indicated good health and an ability to work. It also provided visible evidence of a dense, caring social network. Here, the biggest concern was of a failing appetite or of losing weight. But the influx of Western media and unhealthy processed Western food marked a change in young Fijian women's attitudes towards their bodies. When thinking about body mortification practices cross-culturally that might seem pathological, deviant, or extreme, it helps to start with fundamental questions about cultural norms. What is the desired or ideal body in terms of shape, size, capabilities, and orientation to the self, the collective, and the environment? How do people get this kind of body? With such a perspective on cultural logic, practices that harm the body, from minor discomfort to literal death, can also be understood as rendering it more powerful, attractive, ideal, and culturally alive to those who undertake them. Do you think there should be a limit to what people are allowed to do to their own body, either for cultural or personal reasons? Are cultural reasons for injuring or modifying the body more valid than personal reasons? Why or why not?
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to learn more, here are some useful resources in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get your regular dose of anthrodorphins.
If you want a historical perspective on the different styles of ethnographic film and how they developed, check out our History of Ethnographic Film video.